I need to tell you about the Facebook message that destroyed my entire world. Not in the dramatic movie-style way where everything explodes at once. Oh, this was slower. More painful. Like watching a building collapse in slow motion, knowing you're inside it, knowing there's nowhere to run. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my favorite day of the week. Mark had his standing poker night with his college buddies, which meant I had the apartment to myself. I'd make myself a nice dinner, watch whatever trashy reality TV I wanted, maybe take a long bath. It was my sacred me time in our otherwise perfectly synchronized life together. We'd been together for 5 years. 5 years of what I thought was the most honest, transparent relationship I'd ever had. Mark was different from the guys I'd dated before. He was open, communicative, emotionally available. We talked about everything. Our fears, our dreams, our childhood traumas. I knew about his difficult relationship with his father, his anxiety about his career, even his embarrassing college hookup stories. Or at least I thought I knew everything. The message came through at 7:32 p.m. I was halfway through my pad thai, some housewives were screaming at each other on my laptop screen, and my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I almost didn't look at it. But something made me pick it up. The message was from someone named Sophie Bennett. The profile picture showed a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. We had no mutual friends. The preview read, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think we need to talk about Mark." My first instinct was that this was some kind of scam. Or maybe a crazy ex-girlfriend. Mark had mentioned a few relationships before me, though he'd always been vague about the details. Said he didn't like dwelling on the past. I'd found it endearing at the time, this man who was so focused on our future together that he didn't want to waste time rehashing old relationships. I clicked on the message. What I read made my pad thai suddenly taste like cardboard in my mouth. "Dear Jessica, I'm so sorry to contact you this way. I've been debating whether to reach out for months now, but I finally decided you deserve to know the truth. My name is Sophie Bennett and I'm Mark's wife. We've been married for 12 years. We have 2 children together, Emma, who's 10, and Jake, who's 7. I found out about you 3 months ago when I saw a charge on our credit card from a jewelry store. When I confronted Mark about it, he eventually admitted he's been living a double life. I know this must be devastating to hear. I'm devastated too. But I thought you should know who you're really with. If you want to talk, I'm here. I imagine we both have a lot of questions." I read the message 17 times. I counted. Each time I expected the words to change, to rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something less catastrophic. But they stayed the same. Wife. 12 years. 2 children. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I stood up, sat down, stood up again. I walked to the bathroom and threw up my dinner. Then I sat on the cold tile floor and tried to breathe. This had to be a mistake. Some kind of cruel prank or misunderstanding. Mark was at poker night right now like he was every Tuesday. With his college buddies Steve and Mike and Jason. Guys I'd met multiple times. We'd all gone to Steve's wedding together 2 years ago. I'd had brunch with their girlfriends and wives. This couldn't be real. But even as I told myself this, pieces started clicking into place. Little things I'd dismissed or explained away over the years. Mark traveled for work a lot. 2 or 3 times a month, sometimes for a week at a time. He was a consultant, he'd said. It required being on-site with clients. I'd never questioned it because he'd told me this from the beginning, before we'd even started officially dating. It was just part of who he was, part of the package. He never wanted me to come to his office. Said it was boring, that I'd hate it, that he barely spent time there anyway since he was always traveling or working from home. I'd met his boss once, briefly, at a work happy hour. But Mark had seemed anxious that whole night, kept rushing us out early. He only saw his family on major holidays and I'd never been invited. He said they were difficult, judgmental people who'd made his childhood miserable. He was low contact with them for his own mental health. I'd respected that boundary. I'd even felt protective of him, angry at these people who'd hurt the man I loved. His college friends, the poker night crew, they were great. But now that I really thought about it, when we all hung out, they never really talked about the old days. Never reminisced about college stories or brought up shared memories. It was always surface-level stuff. Sports, work, current events. And there was that one time about 2 years ago, when we'd run into someone at a restaurant who'd called out Mark's name. Mark had frozen, his face going pale, before turning around with a forced smile. The guy had looked confused, said something like, Mark Bennett, right? From the Westchester office. Mark had laughed it off, said the guy had him confused with someone else, but he'd been quiet and distracted for the rest of dinner. I'd asked if he was okay and he'd blamed it on work stress. I'd believed him. Oh God. Oh God, oh God, oh God. I looked at Sophie's profile again with trembling fingers. It was clearly real, clearly active. Photos of two beautiful kids. Emma had Mark's eyes. Jake had his smile. There were pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. A whole entire life that had been happening parallel to mine. In one photo from about 6 months ago, Mark was standing in a kitchen I didn't recognize, wearing a world's best dad apron, flipping pancakes while both kids laughed in the background. The caption read, "Sunday morning tradition continues." Sunday mornings. When Mark told me he liked to go for long runs and then grab coffee with Steve to decompress from the week. I'd always slept in on Sundays, grateful for the lazy morning to myself. He'd come back around noon, smelling like fresh air and coffee, and we'd spend the afternoon together. Sometimes we'd go to brunch, take a walk in the park, catch a matinee movie. All those Sundays he'd been with them, making pancakes with his kids, being a dad, being a husband, and then coming to me, sliding into our bed, kissing me like I was the only woman in the world. I was going to be sick again. But nothing came up this time except dry heaves and tears. I needed to respond to Sophie. I needed to say something. But what do you say to your boyfriend's wife? What's the etiquette for finding out you're the other woman? My fingers hovered over the keyboard for what felt like hours. Finally, I typed, "I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I need some time to process this. Can we talk tomorrow?" Her response came within minutes. "Of course. I'm sorry to drop this on you like this. I know it's a lot. Take all the time you need. I just thought you should know." I looked at the time. 8:45. Mark's poker nights usually ended around 11. He'd come home, kiss me hello, ask about my evening, maybe we'd watch something together before bed. Our normal Tuesday night routine. Except nothing was normal. Nothing had ever been normal. Our entire relationship was built on lies. I couldn't be here when he got home. I couldn't look at his face, hear his voice, pretend everything was fine while my whole world was crumbling. I grabbed my laptop, my phone charger, some clothes, and stuffed them into a bag. Then I left our apartment, the apartment we'd moved into together 3 years ago, the apartment where we talked about our future and our someday wedding and the kids we might have. Kids. He already had kids. 2 of them. A daughter and a son who called him Dad, who made pancakes with him on Sunday mornings while I was probably texting him good morning from what I thought was our bed. I drove to my best friend Rachel's house. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside without questions. It was only after I'd collapsed on her couch, after she'd wrapped me in a blanket and made me tea I couldn't drink, that the story came pouring out. Rachel's face went through a journey of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, horror, rage. When I showed her Sophie's message and the Facebook profile, she actually gasped out loud. "Jessica, oh my God. Oh my God, this can't be real." "It's real," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "Look at those kids, Rachel. They have his face." She looked. And I watched her realize, the same way I had, that this wasn't a scam or a prank or a misunderstanding. This was real. Mark, my Mark, the man I'd planned to spend my life with, had another life. A first life. A real life. And I was just the side piece who didn't know it. "What are you going to do?" Rachel asked. "I don't know. Can't think. I can't breathe." My phone started buzzing. Mark calling. I stared at it like it was a snake. "Don't answer," Rachel said. "You don't have to talk to him until you're ready." But the calls kept coming. After the third one, a text appeared. "Hey babe, poker night ended early. Where are you?" Getting worried. The casual concern in that message made me want to scream. This man who'd been lying to me for 5 years, who had a whole secret family, was worried because I wasn't home when he expected me to be. I texted back, "Staying at Rachel's tonight. Need some space. We'll talk tomorrow." The response was immediate. "Is everything okay? Did something happen?" I almost laughed. "Did something happen? Yeah, you could say that." "Tomorrow," I typed back. Then I turned off my phone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on Rachel's guest bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to understand how I'd been so blind. Every memory I had with Mark was tainted now, poisoned. That romantic weekend in Vermont last fall? He'd probably told Sophie he was on a business trip. The Christmas we spent in my hometown because he said his family wasn't doing anything special? He must have celebrated with his real family before or after. Our 5-year anniversary dinner 3 months ago, where he'd given me a beautiful necklace and told me he'd never been happier. That was the jewelry store charge Sophie had seen. He'd bought me a gift with their shared credit card. The audacity of it was almost impressive. I thought about our first date. We'd met at a coffee shop near my office. I'd been working on my laptop and he'd asked if he could share my table because everywhere else was full. We'd started talking and 3 hours later we were still there, our coffees long cold, completely absorbed in each other. He'd asked for my number and I'd given it to him, feeling that flutter of excitement you get when you meet someone special. Had he been married then? I tried to do the math. Sophie said they'd been married for 12 years. We'd been together for 5. So yes, he'd been married for 7 years when we met. Emma would have been 5 years old. Jake would have been 2. He'd had a toddler at home. A kindergartner. And he'd sat in that coffee shop and flirted with me like he was a single man with nothing to hide. Our whole courtship had been a lie. The way he'd pursued me, the thoughtful dates, the late-night phone calls where we'd talk for hours. I'd thought I was falling in love with someone who was falling in love with me. But he was already in love. He was already married. He already had the life I thought we were building together. How do you do it? How do you maintain 2 complete separate lives? The logistics alone seemed impossible. The lying, the scheduling, the constant vigilance needed to keep the stories straight. Must have been exhausting. Maybe that's why he traveled so much. Maybe that's when he got to rest, when he was alone in a hotel room, not having to perform for either of his families. I remembered the time about a year ago when I'd surprised him at the apartment with takeout from his favorite restaurant. I'd gotten off work early and wanted to do something nice. But when I'd walked in, he'd been on the phone and he'd looked almost panicked to see me. He'd quickly ended the call and been weird for the rest of the evening, distracted and jumpy. I'd thought maybe I'd interrupted an important work call. Now I knew better. It had probably been Sophie. Or one of his kids. Or someone from his real life calling about something mundane while he was in his fake life with me. Morning came eventually. Rachel made me breakfast I couldn't eat. She offered to call in sick to work to stay with me, but I told her to go. I needed to think to plan my next move. First I messaged Sophie back. Can we talk? Call me when you have a chance. I included my number. She called within 10 minutes. Her voice was warm but tired and I could hear what sounded like kids in the background. Hold on, she said. Let me go somewhere quieter. I heard a door close and the background noise faded. Hey. I'm so sorry about all of this. I can't imagine what you must be going through. I can't imagine what you're going through either, I said. You've been married to him for 12 years. You have children with him. Yeah, she said softly. Emma asks about him every day. She doesn't understand why Daddy isn't coming home. Oh God. The kids. They know. They know we're having problems. They don't know about you. I don't know how to tell them that, and honestly I don't know if I should. They're so young. We talked for over an hour. Sophie told me everything. How they'd met in grad school, gotten married young, had Emma a few years later. Mark worked in finance, not consulting. He did travel for work sometimes, but nothing like what he'd told me. Most weeks he came home to their house in Westchester every single night. Except for Tuesdays when he told Sophie he had a standing basketball game with work friends. And except for the 2 or 3 times a month when he told her he had to travel for business. And except for the occasional weekend when he claimed he had a guy's trip or a work conference. That's when he was with me. Those were our times together. Tuesday nights. Long weekends. The week we spent in Croatia last summer that I thought was our romantic vacation? He told Sophie it was a work trip to London. How did you find out? I asked. The credit card thing was the final straw, Sophie said. But honestly I'd been suspicious for a while. Little things that didn't add up. He'd be unreachable at weird times. He'd come home from supposed work trips without any business cards or conference materials. His stories about what he'd done would be vague or inconsistent. And then there was the cologne. The cologne. He wears different cologne when he's with you, doesn't he? Something lighter, more modern. I felt my stomach drop. The Tom Ford one. He said it was his signature scent. He wears Acqua di Gio at home. Has for years. But I started smelling this other scent on him sometimes, and when I asked about it he said it was a sample someone gave him at work. I actually looked up the cologne once when the smell was particularly strong on one of his shirts. Tom Ford Noir. $300 a bottle. Some sample. The cologne thing hit me hard for some reason. It was such a calculated detail. He'd literally changed his scent depending on which life he was living. Like he was two different people. Mark the husband who wore Aqua di Gio. Mark the boyfriend who wore Tom Ford Noir. We compared notes for a while longer, piecing together the puzzle of Mark's double life. She told me about finding a second phone hidden in his car, about the email account she'd discovered that he used for an entirely separate set of contacts. About confronting him and watching him cry and beg and promise it didn't mean anything, that I was just a mistake, a midlife crisis, something he'd end. He said he was going to break up with you, Sophie told me. That was 3 months ago. He swore he'd end it and we'd go to counseling and fix our marriage. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Because we have kids and a mortgage and 12 years of history. But then I saw charges from a restaurant in the city last week. The same restaurant where he told me he'd proposed to you, based on what I found in some old emails. He'd proposed 2 months ago on my birthday at a beautiful Italian restaurant in Manhattan. I'd said yes, of course. We'd started planning our future, looking at venues, talking about whether we wanted a big wedding or something small. I'd called my mom that night, giddy with happiness. She'd cried with joy. My dad had gotten on the phone and welcomed Mark to the family. My little sister had immediately started planning her maid of honor speech. We'd opened a bottle of champagne when we got home and stayed up until 3 a.m. talking about our future. Where we'd live. How many kids we wanted. What we'd name them. And he'd already been married. He'd already had kids. He'd already named them Emma and Jake. While I was fantasizing about our future children, his actual children were sleeping in their beds in Westchester, completely unaware that their father was planning to commit bigamy. I'm so sorry, I whispered to Sophie. I had no idea he was married. I would never have. I know, Sophie said, and she sounded like she meant it. I don't blame you, Jessica. You're a victim in this too. We both are. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm filing for divorce. I already talked to a lawyer. I can't stay with someone who's capable of this level of deception. And honestly, I don't even know who he is anymore. The man I married wouldn't have done this. But maybe I never knew the real him either. We were quiet for a moment, both of us sitting with that terrible realization. That we'd both loved a man who didn't actually exist. Can I ask you something? Sophie said. And please be honest. Did he ever talk about leaving me? About us getting divorced so he could be with you? No, I said. He told me he'd been in serious relationships before but never married. He said he'd been waiting to find the right person and that person was me. He made it sound like I was his first real love. Sophie made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He told me the same thing when we got married. That I was his first real love. After we hung up, I sat with everything she'd told me. The depth of Mark's deception was staggering. He hadn't just lied about being single. He'd created an entire false identity, a fake job, a fabricated family situation. He'd lied about where he was, who he was with, what he was doing, every single day for 5 years. And he'd done it all while looking me in the eye and telling me he loved me, that I was his person, that he wanted to spend forever with me. My phone started buzzing again. Mark. I'd turned it back on an hour ago and he'd already called 6 times. There were also a string of increasingly frantic text messages. Jessica, please call me back. I'm really worried about you. Did I do something wrong? Talk to me. Babe, you're scaring me. At least let me know you're okay. The audacity of those messages was stunning. He was worried about me. He wanted to know if he'd done something wrong? This man who'd been lying to me for 5 years was concerned because I'd spent one night at a friend's house without a detailed explanation. I took a screenshot of the messages and sent them to Rachel with a caption, "The nerve of this man." She responded immediately, "Do not respond to him. Make him sweat. Better yet, block him." But I wasn't ready to block him yet. I wanted my confrontation. I wanted to see his face when he realized I knew everything. I wanted him to understand that his carefully constructed house of cards had finally collapsed. This time I answered his call. "Jessica, thank God. Where are you? What's going on? Your text scared me." His voice. The voice I'd loved, that had whispered sweet things to me, that had laughed at my jokes and comforted me when I was sad. Sounded the same as always. How was that possible when everything had changed? I talked to Sophie, I said. Silence. Complete absolute silence. I could almost hear his brain scrambling, trying to figure out what story he could tell to fix this. Jessica, he started. Don't, I said. Don't lie to me anymore. I know everything. I know about Emma and Jake. I know about your house in Westchester. I know about your real job. I know that Tuesday poker nights are fake and your work trips are fake and your difficult family is actually your wife and children. Let me explain. Explain what, Mark? Explain how you had two families. Explain how you proposed to me while you were married to someone else. Explain how you lied to my face every single day for 5 years. It's complicated, he said, and I actually laughed. Complicated? You think this is complicated? You're not some tortured soul caught between two loves, Mark. You're a liar. You're a cheater. You built a life with me based entirely on lies. I love you, he said desperately. I know you don't believe me right now, but I love you. I've always loved you. You don't love me. If you loved me, you would have told me the truth. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let me plan a wedding to a man who's already married. If you loved me, you wouldn't have made me the other woman without even giving me a choice. What do you want me to say? His voice was breaking now. Yes, I lied. Yes, I messed up. But what we have is real, Jessica. My relationship with you is more real than anything I have with Sophie. You have children with Sophie. 2 beautiful children who love you and miss you. How dare you say I'm more real than them? That's not what I meant. What did you mean then, Mark? Because from where I'm sitting, you had your cake and ate it too for 5 years. You had a wife and kids and a house in the suburbs. And you had me, the girlfriend in the city who didn't know any better. You had 2 complete lives, and you would have kept going if Sophie hadn't found that credit card charge. He was crying now. I could hear it in his voice. I never meant for any of this to happen. When I met you, it was supposed to be just coffee. Just a conversation. But then we started talking and I felt something I hadn't felt in years and I couldn't walk away. So you decided to have an affair instead? For 5 years. It wasn't like that. Started as an affair, yes, but it became more. You became more. I fell in love with you, Jessica. Really, truly in love. And I know I should have left Sophie then, but the kids. Don't you dare use those children as an excuse for your lies. If you cared about them, you wouldn't have risked destroying their family. You wouldn't have proposed to another woman while they called you daddy. I was going to tell you, he said. I was trying to figure out how. When were you going to tell me? Before or after we got married? Before or after I had your kids? Were you just going to keep living 2 lives forever? I don't know. I don't know, okay? I was paralyzed. Every time I thought about telling you the truth, I'd imagine losing you and I couldn't do it. I couldn't bear the thought of you looking at me the way you're looking at me right now. You can't even see me right now. I can hear it in your voice. The disgust. The hatred. I don't hate you, I said, and I was surprised to find it was true. I feel sorry for you. You had 2 women who loved you, 2 families, and you couldn't appreciate either one enough to be honest. Sophie's filing for divorce. And I never want to see you again. So you're going to end up alone and you'll deserve it. Jessica, please. Please don't do this. We can work through this. I'll leave Sophie, I'll do whatever you want. I don't want you to leave Sophie. I want you to be a father to your children. I want you to deal with the consequences of what you've done. But mostly I want you out of my life. At least let me see you. Let me talk to you in person. You owe me that much. I owe you. My voice rose. I don't owe you anything, Mark. You owe me 5 years of my life. You owe me the truth you should have told me from the beginning. You owe me an apology for making me complicit in destroying another woman's marriage without even knowing it. I'm sorry. God, Jessica, I'm so sorry. Your apology means nothing to me. I want you to come get your things from the apartment today. I want you out of my life. And I want you to tell Sophie the truth, the whole truth, because she deserves that much. Jessica, please. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of clarity. For 5 years I'd let Mark define our relationship, set the pace, make the rules. I'd been so grateful that he chose me, so convinced that what we had was special. I'd never questioned anything because I trusted him completely. Well, that was done now. No more blind trust. No more taking people at their word. No more being the girl who was too naive to see what was right in front of her. Mark did come to get his things that day. I made Rachel stay with me because I didn't trust myself to be alone with him. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept. Good. He tried to talk to me, to explain, to justify what he'd done. I let him talk himself out while Rachel and I boxed up his belongings. 5 years of a relationship fit into 8 cardboard boxes. Seemed like it should be more somehow. I never meant to hurt you, he said as we packed up his clothes. You have to believe that. What I believe is that you never thought about whether you were hurting me, I said. You thought about what you wanted. And what you wanted was 2 lives. I wanted you. I still want you. Rachel snorted from across the room where she was packing up Mark's books. Unbelievable. You're actually unbelievable. Mark ignored her. Jessica, look at me. Please. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd loved, who I'd planned to marry. He looked older, somehow more tired. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. I loved you, I said. I loved you so much. I would have done anything for you. And you knew that, and you used it. You used my love to keep me from asking questions, from looking too closely at the parts of your life that didn't make sense. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that Sophie's children are asking where their daddy is? Is it fair that I wasted 5 years of my life on a man who was never really mine? Is it fair that you get to walk away from this with nothing but some hurt feelings while Sophie and I have to pick up the pieces of the lives you destroyed? He didn't have an answer for that. He just stood there looking miserable while we finished packing. When we were done, when all 8 boxes were stacked by the door, he tried one more time. Can I at least hug you goodbye? I took a step back. No. I don't ever want you to touch me again. His face crumpled. 5 years together, and this is how it ends. With you refusing to even let me hug you. You ended this the day you met me and didn't tell me you were married. This is just me finally catching up to reality. He left with his boxes, making multiple trips to his car while Rachel and I watched from the doorway. On his last trip, he paused and turned back to me. I really did love you, Jessica. I know you don't believe me, but it's true. Maybe you did, I said. In your own selfish, destructive way. But your love wasn't worth what it cost me. After he drove away, I closed the door and leaned against it. Rachel pulled me into a hug and I finally let myself cry. Not pretty, silent tears, but huge, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the relationship I'd lost, for the future I'd imagined, for the naive girl I'd been who'd believed every word he said. But mostly I cried for the time I'd wasted. 5 years I could never get back. The next few weeks were a blur of practical tasks. I had to tell my family what happened. That conversation with my parents was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But we met him, my mom kept saying, confused. We spent Thanksgiving with him last year. He seemed so nice, so genuine. He is good at seeming genuine, I said bitterly. That's how he pulled this off for so long. My dad was furious in that quiet, controlled way he got when he was really angry. Give me his address. I want to talk to him. No. It's not worth it. He's not worth it. My sister flew in from Chicago to stay with me for a week. She helped me change the locks on the apartment, helped me cancel the venue we'd reserved for the wedding, helped me return the few wedding-related items I'd already purchased. Every task was a small death, another piece of the future I'd imagined being packed away or thrown out. I also had to tell our friends. The mutual friends Mark and I had made together over the years. Some of them didn't believe me at first. Mark had been that convincing, that good at playing the role of devoted boyfriend. But when they saw Sophie's Facebook profile, when they saw those kids who looked just like Mark, they couldn't deny it anymore. Most of them were horrified and supportive. A few, though, seemed almost excited by the drama of it all, asking invasive questions about how I felt, whether I'd suspected, what the confrontation was like. I cut those people out of my life without hesitation. I didn't need spectators. I needed real friends. Rachel was amazing through all of it. She never once said, "I told you so," even though she'd occasionally expressed concerns about Mark's frequent travel and his vagueness about his past. She just showed up, day after day, with food I couldn't eat and bad movies to distract me and a shoulder to cry on whenever I needed it. "You're going to get through this," she told me one night as we sat on my couch, surrounded by the detritus of my failed relationship. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you will." "How can you be sure?" "'Cause I know you. You're one of the strongest people I know. And yeah, this is going to hurt for a while. But you're not going to let it break you." I wanted to believe her. But at that moment I felt completely broken. Sophie and I continued to talk occasionally. Not frequently, but every few weeks one of us would reach out. Sometimes to share new information we'd uncovered about Mark's deceptions. Sometimes just to check in to remind each other that we weren't alone in this. She told me about the divorce proceedings, about Mark's lawyer trying to paint her as an unstable wife who'd driven him into the arms of another woman. About how hard it was to explain to Emma and Jake why Daddy didn't live with them anymore. Emma asked me the other day if it was her fault, Sophie said during one of our calls. If she'd been bad and that's why Daddy left. She's 10 years old and she's blaming herself for her father's infidelity. My heart broke for those kids. They were innocent in all of this and they were suffering because of Mark's choices. What did you tell her? I told her that sometimes adults make mistakes that have nothing to do with their children. That Daddy loves her and Jake very much, but that he made some very bad choices and Mommy and Daddy can't be married anymore because of those choices. I don't know if she understood. How do you explain something like this to a 10-year-old? I didn't have an answer for that. Through our conversations I learned more about the Mark that Sophie had known. The man who coached Jake's soccer team. The guy who always made elaborate birthday cakes for the kids, even though he wasn't a great baker and they usually turned out lopsided. The husband who'd seemed distant and distracted for the past few years, but who Sophie had attributed to work stress. I kept telling myself that marriages go through rough patches, she said. That we'd been together so long, we'd raised kids together, we'd get through whatever this was. I never imagined he had a whole other relationship. Another woman he was planning to marry. I can't imagine what that must have felt like, I said. Finding out that your husband of 12 years was engaged to someone else. Honestly, the engagement hurt worse than the affair. I could have maybe forgiven an affair. People make mistakes. But planning to marry you while still married to me? That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice to destroy everything we'd built. He was right. And hearing her say it made me realize something. Mark hadn't just betrayed us. He'd betrayed his children. He'd been willing to risk their entire world, their sense of security and stability so he could have what he wanted. What kind of father does that? About a month after everything imploded, I started therapy. I'd resisted at first, convinced I could work through this on my own. But Rachel had gently pushed me and I'd finally admitted I needed help. My therapist, Dr. Miranda Chin, was a calm, insightful woman in her 50s who specialized in betrayal trauma. Our first session she just let me talk. I told her everything, the whole sordid story, while she listened without judgment. When I was done she asked, "What do you need most right now?" I thought about it. I need to understand how I didn't see it. How I could be so blind for so long. That's a common response to this kind of betrayal, she said. But I want you to consider something. You weren't blind. You were trusting. And there's a difference. Mark was skilled at deception. He'd been doing it for years with multiple people. The fact that he fooled you doesn't mean you're naive or stupid. It means he was a good liar. But there were signs, I insisted. Things that didn't add up. And I just ignored them. Or you gave him the benefit of the doubt because you loved him and believed he was trustworthy. That's not a character flaw, Jessica. That's being a normal person in a relationship. We're supposed to trust our partners. When that trust is violated, it's not your fault for giving it in the first place. Over the following sessions we worked through my feelings of shame and self-blame. Dr. Chin helped me understand that I was experiencing a specific type of trauma, one that affects your ability to trust not just others but your own judgment. The hardest part of betrayal trauma, she explained, is that it makes you doubt your own perception of reality. If you couldn't see that Mark was lying about something this fundamental, what else might you be wrong about? It creates a pervasive sense of uncertainty that can be paralyzing. He was right. I found myself second-guessing everything. Did my friends really like me or were they just being polite? Was my boss actually satisfied with my work or was he about to fire me? Was the barista at my regular coffee shop being friendly, or was she laughing at me behind my back? That's the betrayal talking, Dr. Chin would remind me. Not every smile is fake. Not every relationship is built on lies. Mark lied to you, but that doesn't mean everyone will. Slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild my sense of self. I started to separate what Mark had done from who I was as a person. His betrayal didn't mean I was unlovable or stupid or naive. It meant he was a liar who'd made terrible choices. One day, about 2 months after everything fell apart, I was walking through the park near my apartment when I saw a dad playing with his two kids. The little girl was about Emma's age, the boy a bit younger. They were flying a kite and the dad was laughing as he helped them guide it through the air. I stopped and watched them for a moment, and instead of feeling angry or sad, I felt a strange sense of peace. Those kids had a dad who was present, who was honest, who wasn't living a double life. Emma and Jake deserved that too. And someday maybe they'd have it. Maybe Sophie would meet someone who would be a good stepfather to them. Someone who would show up, tell the truth, and love them without reservation. And maybe someday I'd meet someone too. Someone who would be honest from the start. Someone who would choose me fully and completely without hedging his bets or keeping secrets. But first I needed to heal. I needed to learn to trust myself again. 3 months after the Facebook message that changed everything, I was doing better. Not great, not healed, but better. I'd started going out with friends again, started enjoying things again. I'd even gone on a date, though it hadn't led to anything. I wasn't ready yet, and that was okay. Sophie sent me a message one evening. Divorce is final. He tried to fight for more custody, but given the circumstances he only got supervised visitation for now. Emma's in therapy. Jake seems okay, but I worry about what he's internalizing. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you. For being honest with me, for not blaming me, for being a decent human in a really horrible situation. I messaged back, thank you too. I know this sounds weird, but I'm glad you reached out. I'd still be living a lie if you hadn't. Me too. I hope you're doing okay. Getting there. You. Same. One day at a time, right? Right. That's become my motto. One day at a time. Some days are harder than others. Some days I'm angry at Mark for what he stole from me. Some days I'm angry at myself for not seeing the signs. Some days I'm just sad for everyone involved, for Sophie and the kids, and even for Mark, who destroyed his own life because he couldn't be honest. But most days I'm just trying to move forward. I'm rediscovering who I am outside of that relationship. I'm learning to trust my own judgment again. I'm figuring out what I want my future to look like, now that the future I'd planned has been taken away. It's been 6 months now since that Facebook message destroyed my world. I'm in therapy. I'm learning to trust my own judgment again, to believe that I'm not stupid or naive just because I believed someone I loved. I'm learning that some people are really good at lying, and that's not a reflection on the people they lie to. Dr. Chin and I are working on what she calls post-traumatic growth. The idea that trauma, while terrible, can sometimes lead to positive changes. I'm not sure I buy it completely yet, but I can see small changes in myself. I'm more cautious now, yes, but also more aware. I pay attention to my instincts in a way I never did before. I ask questions. I don't just accept things at face value. Last week I went to dinner with a guy from my gym. Nice guy, attractive, seemed genuine. When he mentioned that he'd been divorced for 2 years, I asked to see his divorce decree. He looked surprised, maybe a little offended, but he showed it to me on his phone. I apologized for being paranoid and explained what had happened with Mark. No, I get it, he said. That's brutal. I'd be paranoid too. We ended up having a good conversation about trust and relationships and how hard it is to start over after being hurt. I don't know if anything will come of it, but the fact that I could even go on a date, could even consider trusting someone new, feels like progress. Rachel says I'm doing great. My therapist says I'm doing the work. My mom says she's proud of how strong I'm being. But most days I'm just trying to survive, to put one foot in front of the other, to build a life that's mine and mine alone. Sophie sent me a message last week. Emma had asked about me. Not by name, obviously, since Emma doesn't know I exist. But she'd asked her mom if Daddy had another family somewhere else. Kids are intuitive like that. They sense things. Sophie said she'd told Emma the truth in an age-appropriate way. That Daddy had made some very bad choices and had been spending time with another woman when he should have been home with his family. That it wasn't Emma's fault or Jake's fault or even Mommy's fault. That sometimes adults make terrible mistakes that hurt the people they love. Emma had cried. Had asked if the other woman had kids too, if Daddy loved them more. Sophie had assured her that there were no other kids, that Emma and Jake were Daddy's only children, that he loved them very much even though he'd done something very wrong. I cried when I read that message. For Emma, who at 10 years old had to grapple with the reality that her father was capable of such profound deception. For Jake, who was probably too young to fully understand but would carry this wound into adulthood. For Sophie, who had to explain the unexplainable to her traumatized children. And for myself, for the future I'd imagined with Mark. The children we talked about having. the family we'd planned to build. All of it was a fantasy based on lies. But here's what I know now, 6 months later. I'm going to be okay. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. I'm going to heal from this. I'm going to learn to trust again, to love again, to believe in the possibility of an honest relationship. And when I do, when I finally meet someone who deserves my trust, I'll be smarter about it. I'll ask questions. I'll pay attention. I'll trust my instincts. But I'll also be open, because closing myself off completely isn't the answer either. Mark doesn't get to destroy my capacity for love. He doesn't get to take that from me too. The thing that haunts me most isn't the betrayal itself, though that's bad enough. It's knowing that he would have kept going. If Sophie hadn't found that credit card charge, if she hadn't reached out to me, Mark would still be living his double life. He would have married me while already being married. He would have let me have his children while he already had children. He would have let me build my entire life around a man who didn't even really exist. That's what I can't forgive. Not just the lying, but the fact that he would have let it continue forever. I would have been the other woman for the rest of my life, and I never would have known. But I do know now. And that knowledge, as painful as it is also powerful. It's the truth. And the truth, no matter how devastating, is always better than living a lie. So to anyone reading this, anyone who might be in a situation that doesn't quite add up, who has a partner with parts of their life that seem off limits or mysterious, I want to say this. Trust your instincts. Ask questions. Don't let love make you blind to red flags. Because somewhere out there might be a Sophie who's about to send you a Facebook message. And you deserve to get it sooner rather than later. You deserve the truth even when it destroys you. Especially when it destroys you. Because the truth, no matter how painful, is better than building your life on a foundation of lies. And if you do get that message, if your world does come crashing down the way mine did, know this. You will survive it. Won't feel like it at first. You'll feel like you're drowning, like you'll never breathe normally again. But you will. You'll learn to trust yourself again. You'll learn to see the betrayal for what it was. A reflection of your partner's character, not yours. You'll learn that being trusting and open isn't a weakness, even though someone exploited those qualities. And someday when you're ready, you'll love again. Differently, maybe more carefully, but you'll love. Because that's what we do. We survive. We heal. We carry our scars, but we don't let them define us. That Facebook message destroyed my world. But it also set me free from a lie I didn't even know I was living. And in the end, painful as it is, that freedom is worth more than any false happiness. I'm Jessica. I was the other woman who didn't know it. And I'm still here, still standing, still healing. One day at a time.